Bringing some important late-breaking news. We're being told that there is a lockdown and an active shooter situation at Robb Elementary School, which is in Uvalde on Old Carrizo Springs Road.
I keep asking questions of what's going on, and nobody's telling me anything.
The death toll in the Uvalde school massacre continues to change. Right now, it stands at 19 kids, 2 adults.
The First Lady placing that bouquet of white roses at the memorial here in front of Robb Elementary School.
Now, 4 weeks since that shooting, a hearing in Austin revealed this. The head of DPS says that police had enough weapons and ammunition to stop the gunman 3 minutes after he entered that building.
Why didn't you do your job? I mean, it's just that simple. Your job is to protect and to serve.
DPS Director Steve McGraw called the response an abject failure. Video of the Uvalde shooting was leaked.
That video was supposed to be released to the victims' relatives Sunday without audio, but some say the families were blindsided by today's leak.
We're suffering, and I know the world is suffering too, but these were our babies. Our babies that were taken from us.
It took months of calls for action, and now Uvalde School District Police Chief is fired.
Pete Arredondo faced the most scrutiny the day of the shooting when law enforcement waited for more than an hour to take down the gunman.
The lights will be on shortly inside Uvalde Elementary School, where they are teaching 3rd and 4th grade, also home to teachers and support staff from Robb Elementary. This is now their new home.
The entire Uvalde CISD Police Department is suspended after criticism for their response to the shooting at Robb Elementary.
And just hours after that announcement came down, the district superintendent announced his plans to retire.
Now Uvalde parents feeling a sense of relief in all this. And newly released 911 recordings shedding light on what law enforcement knew at Robb Elementary and when they knew it. Several media outlets, including CNN and the Texas Tribune, are now reporting on those calls from students and teachers inside Robb Elementary.
It's hard to come here or come back here and not be affected by the pictures and the crosses and the flowers. It's been more than 6 months since the tragic shooting here in Uvalde. 19 students and 2 teachers lost in a classroom here at Robb Elementary.
It was the deadliest school shooting in Texas, and while people in this community continue to grieve and mourn the ones they lost, they're also fighting for change.
You see, Uvalde is a small city just 90 miles west of San Antonio, and before this tragedy, they were known for being wholesome, the kind of place where everybody knows each other.
What happened here affected everyone. Small children lost their siblings and friends and are struggling to cope with the horrifying events of that day. Even people who didn't lose someone are still struggling, and those who did, they're fighting for change.
In the next hour, you're going to hear their stories and the stories of those who've lost.
Now let's start with those whose world changed 6 months ago.
Waking up is the nightmare. I just want to see her. I think I always look for her in a crowd where other kids are playing. I just cannot believe I left her at school. I cannot believe I left my child at school. And it's a mistake you can't fix.
We were leaving and, he's like, Mom, let me go with you. And I'm like, no, stay here. You have 2 more days. Enjoy it, 2 more days and then you're off for the summer. Okay, I'll stay. And and he just looks back and he waves at us and we wave back and not even thinking, anything was gonna happen. And I would say maybe within 30 minutes we start getting texts from the school.
I was at my office. I have a son that's first responder and so he runs into my office and tells me, hey, that we have a bailout with the shooting at Robb Elementary School, and that's what everybody thought it was at first, was a bailout, because we've had so many here. So I go to Robb, Elementary School. And so, you know, I get there, the police are there, you know, people are starting to get there. I think, you know, I think I was the second car in line behind the police car when I got there.
It was still an active
Still
scene.
an active scene. It hadn't even, I mean, it was just unfolding, and maybe 15 minutes after it started, 10, 15 minutes. So, you know, we were there. There were officers coming from everywhere. There were a lot of DPS. There were federal agents there. There were a lot of officers on that scene that day. And of course, you know, and I will say that being from the outside, there was a lot of confusion even on the outside. It didn't seem like anybody had taken a command position at that time.
In the minute that we confirmed that there was a mass shooting with the weapon that was used, then we knew it was going to be serious and we would be prepared. And that's when the hospital went into emergency operation mode, the whole hospital.
For someone who has lived in Uvalde since you were 1 year old, I'll call you a neighbor.
Sure.
Was it disbelief? Was it sorrow? Was it all of the above?
It was every bit of that. My heart's still broken for that. I mean, you know, there's not a day that doesn't go by that I wish, you know, I keep thinking maybe it's a dream and I'm going to wake up and it's not going to be real. I mean, Uvalde, Texas, you never expect something like this in Uvalde, Texas. I mean, my heart was broken that day for those children. My heart's broken for those families to this day. I mean, this is something that, you know, children, I mean, parents are not supposed to bury their children. Children are supposed to bury their parents. And, you know, we have 19 families that had to bury their children, and 2 teachers, and 1 teacher's husband. I mean, it's just, it's heartbreaking. It's just, I mean, there's no words to describe it. It's just, I mean, and I know how I feel, so I can't even imagine how these families feel.
I don't think it'll ever get easy. Said it to other people before. We did grieving at the funeral home, but we haven't grieved now. We know, I guess you want to say that she's not here, but then again, we just don't want to come to reality that that's it, that she isn't here. Every morning we wake up, before all this, Lexi was always the first one up and would acknowledge us with, "I'm hungry." But now it's quiet.
We're there, we're talking to our family, you know, and everything. And then we get a call from, was it the nurse? The nurse called and she said, "This is so-and-so, I'm the head surgical nurse here, and we're here with No, and this can take a little bit longer because it's not a flesh wound. He suffered a gunshot wound in the lower back and it exited through his shoulder." So then we're like, okay, so, you know, and
we were under the impression, you know, that it was just a flesh wound, which we thought, I mean, you know, something
And because of the way he
small.
was when I got to see him, I mean, I couldn't see anything but just bandages, so I thought, well, okay, I mean, flesh wound. The first time I saw his wounds, I just broke down. I couldn't take it. I was like, you know, my baby, you know, what did he endure? And then, you know, how did he endure for so long? You know, that was one of the things that, you know, we just ask ourselves, what was he doing? You know, how was he doing it? One of the security guards at the hospital that was there when he flew in, so I ran into him the next day after the surgery and everything. He goes, "You're the dad, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Well," he goes, "I've been in Afghanistan, Iraq, everywhere." I said, "Just got out. I've spent 25 years in the service." He goes, "And I've seen grown men take lesser shots and wounds and not recuperate from this." He goes, "So please do everything you can to make sure you take care of it."
For these kids, since you spend so much time with them, what was the hardest thing for them to understand or to deal with, whether that's physically or emotionally?
It's probably a blend, because for some of them, their lives were totally changed by the extent of the injuries that happened to them. But I think probably psychologically, the extent runs so far deeper than even physical injuries that they're going to have to continue to deal with. When you're dealing with trauma patients, you're not just dealing with the patient themselves, you're dealing with their families as well. And so you just have to go in and be sensitive to their needs. Even the simple things like the doors shutting would set off some of the patients.
The children, especially when they go through something like this, have a type of resilience that you almost can't fathom. And if we're talking about children and the way that this injury occurred, it's at a school. It's at what they thought and everyone thought was their safe space, right? So some of the things that they're gonna have to go through is learning to go back to school and learning that, hey, this can be and will be a safe space again. You know, those things are the hurdles for them if they're not dealing with some physical scars that they're still going through therapy with. And that, you know, it's not like therapy is going to make them forget the event, but it's going to help them live with it and live a functional and fulfilled life and achieve what they should have been able to achieve without having had that experience.
As we reflect on the trauma this town has endured, let's shift our focus to the safeguards that have been put in place to prevent something like this from ever happening again.
Coming up, we're talking with local, state, and national leaders about what they're doing to keep our communities safe.
Behind us is Uvalde's historic county courthouse. And as we continue to take a look back at what happened that horrific day at Robb Elementary, we also want to take a look forward. How does this town heal but not forget?
That's a question that we've asked the people that were elected to represent Uvalde. After all, people are looking to them for leadership. But what does that look like?
I've now met 19 sets of parents, families of teachers that were lost. Someday this is going to affect just about everybody watching this show on some level. Their cousins, their friends. Someday somewhere in this state they're going to know of a loved one that died from unnecessary, preventable gun violence. It's just happening more and more.
This has stayed with many people, you know, to have that leverage of loss, that number of loss has just been very, very heartbreaking, but there's also been a lot of wonderful things that have come out of it. I'd also, you know, as I travel my district and the state, I remind people what happened in Uvalde can happen absolutely anywhere, and we have to get ahead of it, and we also have to be ready.
How much time have you spent in Uvalde and what have you specifically done there? Because I'm sure you're getting pulled in lots of different directions.
There's not one day that goes by where our team doesn't work on helping Uvalde, because it's not just about Uvalde.
Can you be specific?
Yeah, exactly. So one, we've helped families get visas. A lot of people don't realize some of the families are Mexican nationals. And they're not all, you know, traditional families. Some of them have stepchildren, some of them were raised by grandparents, not to mention the people that were impacted otherwise. And very specifically, we were able to secure $2 million for a mental health facility in Uvalde. This is a much needed project, long overdue. Just recently, we were able to secure $442,000 for school safety for the Uvalde Independent School District. These are all tangible things. So in some cases, it's been, you know, us displaying some of the children's artwork in DC and just bringing awareness to what has happened. Kind of what you mentioned earlier, making sure it doesn't fade away. In other cases, it's been passing legislation like the Safe First Community Act and ultimately bringing dollars back to our district. So there's not a day goes by where we're not working on Uvalde.
Are you comfortable that that's enough to prevent another shooting?
You know, Stephanie, I'm a father of 6, and my children are school-age children. And so to me, this is an area that should unite us, not divide us. We should all go, how do we ensure that our children are safe in our schools and everywhere? But let's start with our schools. So to me, no, it's not enough. I think we have to continue to do more.
I know that you have sued DPS and you've tried to get answers, but is there anything else within your power that you're going to try to do for these people?
Well, we've been very, very much on focus in trying to make sure that they have resources from government. We found early on that they weren't getting some of the unemployment compensation benefits out of VOCA, which is the Victims of Crime Assistance Program, and so we're making some inroads into that. Those monies have been distributed, and so families are doing a little bit better financially. But, you know, these families are just broken emotionally. And the only thing that they have to look forward to is just a duller sense of pain. I heard mothers and fathers in the Civic Center that had turned into a reunification center. When they found out that their children were dead because they had to do DNA matches, so you can imagine how damaged these poor babies' bodies were. I heard screams from mothers and fathers that I'd never heard before. The most god-awful screams, the most god-awful wailing. I wouldn't want that to happen to any other parent in Texas, and I wouldn't want any other legislator to have to hear what I heard that night. They haunt me still. We have to, as policymakers, we have to make sure that this never happens again.
So you have ideas on what it is that we should do to prevent another Uvalde, another Santa Fe, but you're saying you don't think that this is going to happen, not in Texas, not now.
Not while these Republicans are in power. They just would rather answer to the NRA than their own constituents.
Do you feel sometimes as a citizen of Uvalde that you're caught in the middle on all this? You've got both sides of the political spectrum that are fighting over what should and shouldn't have happened in Uvalde, and meanwhile you guys are caught in the middle.
Yeah, I do, we do. I mean, you know, we've got this group saying it's their fault, this group saying it's their fault. That's our problem. We want to point the finger at everybody, but we're the problem. Our politicians are the problem because it's either got to be one-sided, my way or the highway, and that's not what we elected them for. But still, we don't have that. The rhetoric coming now is it's, you know, you're either a Republican and you're a bad guy, or you're a Democrat and you're a liberal and a green, and that's not that way. Everybody's not that way, and we need to be able to sit down and talk with one another and come up with solutions that work for everybody.
What do you want to see happen now,
well,
today,
I mean,
moving forward?
What I want to see, I want to see the transparency come out. Let's get through with let's quit the behind the scenes investigation or whatever. Let's put it on the table. It is what it is. Let's be transparent. You know, we're trying to, you know, move this thing forward. I don't think this community is going to sit by for 6 months, a year while we investigate. I don't think that's going to be, I mean, we know what happened that day. We need to get it out there what happened, and that's part of the healing process.
I would guess, because we've talked before, that being defined by this tragedy is not something you think is fair to Uvalde.
Well, I mean, that's always going to be a part of Uvalde's history now, and that's, you know, I'm sad that that's part of our history, but we'll own it. It happened here. I mean, those are 19 precious angels, citizens of Uvalde, children of Uvalde, and 2 teachers. So, I mean, that will always be part of our history. But, and I'm trying to think the right word here to say, we can let their joy and their love, and that you've heard the stories of how much these kids like TikTok and sports and different things, and how much they love life. We can choose that path as a way forward instead of a way of sadness.
It's clear when you speak to people in town, the shooting's impact reached beyond the walls of Robb Elementary.
It's not just leaders who are doing something. Now, regular people who never saw themselves as politicians or even activists are stepping up to help. You're going to hear from them after the break.
A shuttered Robb Elementary, boarded up, fenced, and overgrown. It's perhaps one of the most powerful reminders of what happened here on a sunny afternoon on one of the last days of school.
The people of Uvalde have been very generous with us with their time and their feelings, and there are reminders throughout this town. As a matter of fact, just off the main thoroughfare where we're standing, there are murals to honor the youngest victims. But how do they want their town to be remembered? How has this mass shooting affected those who call Uvalde home?
Steve and I sat down with 4 Uvalde natives who, in their own words, share how the community is feeling.
So we're here with 4 of our newest friends. We have Tina, Deanna, Michelle, and Juan. Thank you guys for joining us today. What do you want people to know about Uvalde?
I think and believe strongly that Uvalde is a very resilient community. We have people here that have been part of this community all their lives. Some of us left and have come back. You know, it's always going to be home for those of us that do leave. And the tragedy, of course, shook us to the core. I mean, it's something beyond imagination. And we're all dealing with it a little bit differently, but we all want the same outcome. We want accountability for what happened. We want to understand how it could happen, and we want to make sure that it never happens again. And so all of us in our own way, it looks different, but we all want the same thing.
So you have 2 fairly young children.
Yes, sir.
How were they affected by what happened at Robb Elementary?
So I have a 6 and 9-year-old. My daughter was at Robb Elementary at the time. We had just had an award ceremony, and you know, we were saying our goodbyes, and my daughter was, you know, begging us to go home, and I said, no, it's the last week of school, you need to stay home. And my mom was like, Tina, don't be so hard on her. And her teacher was like, we're really not doing much, you know, we're just watching movies. And so I said that was fine. She played across the street with one of the victims, and she rode a bus since pre-K with another victim. And so she was at the river with another victim the weekend before the event happened. And so she did lose all of her friends during that event.
Right.
Diana, you mentioned times have changed. It was so simple back then. How do you compare it now, especially after this tragedy? You mentioned you seeing the kids before play, and I would imagine that now even more, that's not happening here in Uvalde.
Right. What's interesting to me is we have, of course, the major concerns about safety on our campuses. You know, the parents feel that with the tall fences, the added law enforcement presence, the cameras, all of those things that the school district is attempting to complete and get done, so children will be safer and parents will feel like their children are safer. But I do know that children need to experience childhood, and as adults, we need to create spaces and places where they're allowed to do that, where they're safe and we feel that they're safe as well. And I think that the change in the way our children live now, it's just a part of change. It's just a part of how community values, community morals change, community expectations. And so I raised my children several years ago, so it's a different world. Parents look at life differently, and so we also have, of course, technology now, and maybe the simple things of life that I grew up with now look different because we have a different world.
Michelle, I want to ask you a question. It's my understanding you live near Robb.
Yes, sir. I live 3 houses down.
How Were you home that day? How has that day changed your neighborhood?
I wasn't home when it first started, and I was on my way home because I had a doctor appointment, and I was getting text messages and phone calls, and at that point when I was driving home, it was still assumed that it was just like a bailout. I was getting reports that there was a lot of chaos in front of the house and in that intersection by the school. When I did drive up, the street was packed. I couldn't even get into my own driveway. I had to ask people to move, not understanding yet what was going down, so that I could get into my driveway because, you know, I didn't want to be late for my appointment. And then I realized that the seriousness of it, and so some of us were out there with our phones and are, you know, taking pictures or videos or whatever, and then just trying to listen to what the cops were yelling and try to get a better understanding of how serious it was. Once we did, then it just felt like the whole world stopped. And then it was, you couldn't get out of your driveway at that point for days. They even barricaded the streets. The only thing that I knew to do was to go outside and, you know, if I saw people that were upset, I would go out and try to give them comfort, and just daily trying to collect as much information about what was going on as I could. From my house, from the front yard, you could see the front of Robb Elementary where the sign is, and from my backyard, you can see the back half, the parking lot, like where everything started. So I have a daily reminder of that day.
As the weeks went on, there were less crowds, the funerals happened. What have mornings been like in your neighborhood since then?
Well, right following the aftermath and as the crowds dissipated somewhat, I mean, there was still a lot of activity. There was still investigations going on, and there was still media presence there. But some of it had dissipated. The dead silence is what affected us. Because you always heard the kids playing.
Sorry, Michelle.
That's all right. And it wasn't until just recently, probably the last, I don't know, month, that I actually heard kids in the neighborhood outside again playing.
How did that feel?
Bittersweet.
So my next question is, how do we move forward? I mean, has the healing process begun in Uvalde?
You know, I heard
how do we move forward but not forget? Does that make sense?
I heard a gentleman tell me the other day and reminded me that you can't heal until you forgive. And now it's a hard sentence because the things that were happened, there was too much of a one-sided deal, you know, one person with issues hurting so many families. So I don't know how you, I know how you have to forgive them, even though it's hard, but you heal if you forgive. And so we need to forgive, and we need to move forward with what we have to improve on, and never forget about the kids, because there was, and the teachers, and they were all very important part of our community.
We definitely need to honor the memories of those lost, the 19 children and 2 teachers. And we'll never forget. It isn't a tragedy that you can just put on the back burner, put on the shelf, and move on. But we do need to move forward. I have great empathy for the families that lost children. I have great empathy for the families that have children that were injured physically, those that have children that are mentally injured because of that experience. But in the middle of all of that, we have a community that needs to move forward because we still have the living, all of the children, all of the families that we need to live for, we need to build for, we need to move forward for, because that's our future. I also believe that the deaths of those 21 individuals will have a greater impact on this community than we can even imagine. And it's already having that impact, but it's going to be what we build on. It's going to be what we heal with even, because these individuals were amazing, full of life, full of joy, laughter, creativity, so much that they've left us as a legacy that we can build on. And that's what I want to do and be a part of, because it's necessary to continue to move forward. We have a future ahead of us here in Uvalde, and we'll honor the memories of those children and teachers that put us in this place. For whatever reason, we'll never understand possibly, but we need to rise up, reclaim who we are, what we are, and we can do that. I truly believe it. It's not going to be easy, but it's possible.
Michelle, you live right next to Robb, where there were so many flowers left and so many tributes left to the children and those teachers. And even San Antonio's mayor said, we just want to open up our arms and put them around the community of Uvalde. Did you feel that?
Oh, absolutely. I have felt it at Robb, because I go down there pretty regularly, and I run into people from all over the United States and from different countries too. Some that there was one group of ladies that they had to have an interpreter because they didn't speak a word of English. And at the square where we've had some demonstrations with protest signs or what have you, there was a lady and her son, I believe they were from Detroit, that came all the way down because they knew what was happening and they just wanted to give love, and that's what they did. They just stood by and they held up signs and they hugged people and then became like Facebook friends with a lot of people, and that's support. It would be nice if there was a continuous show of that kind of support, just that physical presence. Right now we know that the families are getting a lot of support. There's also a little bit of resistance from some groups in the community, but overall the support is overwhelming, and I hope it continues, especially as they're fighting for this accountability.
Yo quiero decir que yo estoy aquí por mi gente y nosotros estamos muy fuertes. So I'm here for my people, and I will let you know that we are very strong. And I do believe that they messed with the wrong community. So we are not going to give up. We're going to stay strong, and we're going to continue to fight. So, as Hispanics here, one thing that you'll know is that we're very close family. Regardless of any division that happens, we pull together, and nosotros tenemos cariño. We have lots of love to give and also to receive. And I do believe you know, I'm a Tri Sigma, and our motto is, in order to receive much, you must give much. And I do believe in that, whether it's love or whether it's just support or you know, just being an open body. So with that being said, they messed with the wrong community. So with that, we will prevail.
There is no doubt the people of Uvalde are resilient and they will heal, but it will take time.
Coming up, how this city is committed to remaining Uvalde strong.
The recovery process hasn't been easy for Uvaldians, but we have seen this community pull through, helping one another.
It's created 2 lifelines, the Child Bereavement Center of Uvalde and a place called the Uvalde Together Resiliency Center, where everyone is welcome.
We've seen a constancy of folks coming in for services, and we're grateful for that. Grateful that they're giving themselves that permission to reach out for help after such a horrific tragedy such as this. We know that counseling and behavioral health supports are mission critical to a long-term recovery.
And so if we can provide that space where they can come in and feel safe enough to share, which is already such a hard thing for many of us to do when we're grieving or when we're going through bereavement, but if we can just provide the safest space possible to allow them some ultimately and give them that space, then that's how we've added the stuffed animals for kiddos, or we've added the little books that they can come read, or coloring pages, just a variety of things that would feel like home and feel safe.
Our society as a whole doesn't grieve. We don't process loss. We don't have a mechanism to mourn. And a lot of people may not have faith that provides a direction for a lot of people. So just knowing how difficult it is, whether it's the loss of a beloved pet or the loss of a job or a tragedy like here in Uvalde. We just don't know how to do it, and so to be able to come down and provide an opportunity for healing to occur, it's just my honor and privilege to be here.
Why is it so important to have a center like the Bereavement Center present in the community, blocks away probably from their homes?
I think the important part is that a lot of times in rural communities, mental health care kind of takes a back seat to anything else. Uvalde has been kind of they haven't had a lot of providers in the past, so it's not something that people think about. School counselors are there certainly, but they have so many tasks that they need to do, and certainly now they're overloaded and overworked. And so to have a bereavement center and other facilities providing mental health care at no charge is just, I think, a tremendous asset in the community, because a lot of times when you have to pay, that will keep you from going. But having access to free, quality mental health care by licensed professionals is, I just think it's such an asset here in the community.
Well, at the Resiliency Center, we don't only provide mental and behavioral health counseling, but we also provide navigation. We also have health and human services that assist folks in signing up for Medicaid, Medicare, and the SNAP program, just to give a few examples. We also have the workforce development folks, so those who have struggled in gaining employment or have lost employment, they're there to support them as well. So it's really a holistic wraparound of services that we offer families coming in, which is, very prominently the mental behavioral health services, music therapy, support groups, as well as serving really every constituency in the community.
So we utilize at the center a lot of different creative interventions or creative approaches, because kids don't like to sit and talk.
just like this. It's really hard for them too. So what we really try to do is incorporate art, incorporate, painting or drawing, coloring, Play-Doh, toys. We have a wide variety of materials that they can just use to express themselves without having to say the actual words. Like instead of saying, I'm sad because X, Y, and Z, they can color it. Or without saying, this really affected me, they can create a sand tray out of it, which is like a box of sand ultimately, and just a lot of different little miniature figures where they can use to tell a story. It's ultimately a way for them to express themselves without having to relive constantly the exact words or the exact things that they may have to have shared so many times already.
It's important because a lot of times the grief response doesn't happen the next day or the next month or the next 6 months or the next year. Like I said, it's a process, and it could be 2 to 2.5 to 3 years before you ask that question, what's wrong with you? Because it's been a distance from the event or from the loss, but at the same time, it's just when the mind's ready to deal with it. So having a long-term presence, and when people get the courage to present for counseling, that's a tremendous act of trust. And so to think that people would come and go and think that that would be it, that's just kind of cracking the shell. That's not exposing the whole egg, if you will. And what we know about trauma is that it's this one loss, the impetus that brought us all here. But then as you start peeling back the layers of maybe trauma, previous trauma, and things that they've experienced prior to this one event comes to surface, and those memories come back, and you have to start integrating those memories into the loss now, the present loss, but going forward. It's just, it doesn't happen overnight, and we understand that. And so being able to know that we're going to be here in a new facility for 5 more years at the minimum, then I think that's a huge, huge thing for the community.
It's beautiful to see healing all over in any general setting, but to see it in a community that's suffered so much and hasn't had a space to heal, I think is the most beautiful thing I've been able to witness here. And I feel privileged to witness that.
Part of the way these families are healing is by becoming advocates, some campaigning for state elections, others leading protests in Washington, D.C. These families demand change.
I never even think about this guy, this monster, this person. I don't think about it. And there's a sentiment going around that, why aren't we mad at him? Why are we, and when I say we, I'm talking about collectively as a group of survivors and of the deceased, why are we focusing so much on the police and their lack of action, on the school system and why it was broke and things of that nature? But I guess what I want to say, and I'm pretty sure I would feel comfortable in saying this, is that we have not forgotten about him at all. Because yeah, he's the one that went in there and pulled the trigger and did all the damage. But there were certain things in place that allowed that to happen. There are certain things that did not happen that allowed that to continue. There was probably children in there, teachers that could have survived. So there has to be some accountability.
This is a terrible tragedy that happened in Uvalde. It is. And the sad thing is it could happen in any community around us. Uvalde just happened to, the devil chose to choose Uvalde that day. And that's how I look at it, because the sad thing is there were people who knew. This kid had a nickname as a school shooter. Talk to your kids. Talk to to your teenagers. And if you hear that, tell somebody. Maybe we can prevent this. We also got to look at bullying. You know, we've got to be more closer to that. We've got, to stop it. We've got to, make aware, because whether this kid was pushed out or what, we missed something somewhere. Somebody, we missed it, whether it be in school or somewhere, we missed it. So, visit with your kids, talk to your kids, and communicate with them and know what's going on. And hopefully the kids will start talking to their parents, and we can keep tragedies happening. Again, I'll go back to the gun control. I don't know why we don't change the law from 18 to 21. You can't buy a pack of cigarettes if you're not 21. Can't buy a beer if you're not 21. Can't go in a bar, have a drink if you're not 21. So how are we taking anybody's rights away if you can't buy a pistol in Texas till you're 21? So why don't we change the long gun law to 21? There's nothing wrong with that. I've got young kids that they're the ones that said they wouldn't be opposed to it, and so forth. So but we as a country, everywhere, we got to quit this one-sided way. We got to be willing to sit at the table and sit down and talk and have a conversation. Look, we're not going to agree 100% on everything, but together we can all work together and come up with something that works for everyone.
At our state level, we're hoping for them to increase the age to purchase assault weapons from 18 to 21. We want, red flag laws and increased background checks. We want it to be harder for the wrong people to get their hands on these weapons. But ultimately, we want a federal ban on assault weapons. We don't think that they belong with an average citizen.
Do you feel like it's going to happen in Texas?
No, which is why we've been to DC, and that's the conversation I have with these senators. I think just by sharing Lexi's story, by not just, keeping it political, but trying to reach them on like a level of a parent, like a mom and a dad, and just, we're here to protect children, that's what matters. And like, if I leave it to my state, I'll never get what I want. I'll never be able to protect my children, so it needs to happen at the federal level.
Up next, a special tribute as we commit to remembering their names.
May 24th of 2022 will forever be etched in our memories as a day of shock, sadness, and fury.
So much has happened in this town over the last 6 months. An eagerly anticipated election was held. Memorials were created, but perhaps most importantly, bodies and souls started to heal.
As the official investigation deepens political divides, one unifying theme rings true: Uvalde strong.
And it's not just a motto, it's a citywide resolution that in the face of unimaginable tragedy, this community will stand together.
And as the healing continues and the national spotlight shifts away, let us not forget the 21 lives taken.
Right now on KSAT.com, we have a special page dedicated to each and every one of the victims. You can get to know more about them, what their dreams and their aspirations were. It's all part of our commitment to remember their names.
In that light, we leave you tonight with a special tribute.
Under the direction of Mrs. Karen McCarty, here's Uvalde High School Choir with We Remember Them.
Summer, at the opening of winter, at the rustling of the leaves and beauty of autumn tides, at the stars